What would you do if the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally turned their backs on you at the worst moment of your life? And what if, years later, those same people came knocking on your door, not to apologize, but to ask for your help? My name is Laura, and this is the story I never thought I'd have the courage to tell. I still remember every single detail of that morning. The smell of burnt rubber filling my lungs, the sound of shattering glass exploding around me like a bomb going off, the sickening crunch of metal folding in on itself, and then silence. One terrible second of silence before I heard it. Lily, screaming from the back seat. I couldn't move. My left shoulder felt like it had been set on fire, and something warm was running down the side of my face. But I didn't care about any of that. The only thought in my mind was, is my baby still breathing? I need to take you back to who I was before that crash, because none of this makes sense without understanding where I came from. I was 28 years old, working part-time as a nurse just outside Nashville, Tennessee. I lived alone in a small one-bedroom apartment, and I was raising my daughter Lily entirely on my own. Lily had been born 10 weeks earlier, a little early and a little underweight, which meant regular checkups and twice the worry every single day. Her father, Daniel, had disappeared the moment I told him I was pregnant. He sent me one text message, just one, that said, "I'm not ready for this." And that was it. He was gone. I told myself it was okay. I told myself that even without Daniel, I still had my family. I still had my parents. I was wrong about that too. Just minutes before that truck ran the red light and changed everything, I had called my mother. I had begged her to watch Lily for just a few hours, and without a moment of hesitation, she told me, "You chose to have that baby. That's not our responsibility." I hung up the phone, strapped Lily into her car seat, and drove off alone, just like I always did. I had no idea that 12 years later, that same woman would be standing at my front door, hands empty, eyes desperate, asking me to save her. But to truly understand what that phone call meant, and why it broke something deep inside me, you need to understand the family I grew up in. My younger sister Rebecca was 3 years behind me in age, but she had always been a lifetime ahead of me in our parents' eyes. When Rebecca dropped out of college halfway through her sophomore year, my parents barely blinked. My mother just smiled and said, "She's still finding herself. Give her time." When Rebecca borrowed my father's car and came home with a crumpled front bumper and a shrug, my father didn't raise his voice once. He bought her a brand new one within the week. When she quit 4 different jobs in the span of 2 years, my parents quietly covered her rent every single month without being asked. There were never any lectures, never any conditions, just unconditional support. The kind I had been searching for my entire life and never once received. I found out the hard way just how deep that difference ran. 1 week after Lily was born, I called my mother and asked if I could borrow $200 for diapers and formula. $200. She told me they were tight that month and couldn't help. I thanked her and hung up. Then, 3 days later, I accidentally saw a notification on her phone when I stopped by the house. She had just wired $3,000 to Rebecca. That same week. My hands started shaking when I saw that number. Not from anger, from clarity. Because in that moment, I finally understood something I had been refusing to accept for years. I had never truly existed in their eyes. Not the way Rebecca did. That was the weight I was carrying on the morning everything fell apart. Lily had been crying for most of the night, and I had barely slept 2 hours. She had a follow-up appointment at Vanderbilt that I could not miss. Her weight still needed to be monitored closely. I stood in my tiny kitchen at 8:47 in the morning, a bottle half made on the counter, Lily screaming in her crib down the hall. And I did the only thing I could think of. I called my mother one more time. My voice came out smaller than I intended. Mom, I just need someone to watch Lily for 3 hours. That's all I'm asking. I heard her exhale slowly on the other end of the line. Rebecca is going through something right now. We already made plans with her. My throat tightened. Mom, this is your granddaughter. The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, phone still pressed against my ear, listening to silence. Then I set it down, finished making the bottle, buckled Lily into her car seat, and walked out the door. Just the two of us. Same as always. 20 minutes later, at the intersection on Charlotte Pike, a delivery truck ran a red light at full speed and hit the passenger side of my car. The impact spun us 180 degrees and slammed us into the median barrier. Smoke began rising from under the hood. The smell of burning oil filled the air. My left shoulder screamed in pain as I forced myself to turn around. And what I heard next was the only thing that mattered. Lily was crying, loud and furious, still strapped into her seat, still alive. I whispered through my tears, "It's okay, baby. Mama's right here." The ambulance arrived within minutes, and they rushed us both to Vanderbilt. My daughter was unharmed. I had a broken collarbone and 3 stitches above my left ear. And as I lay on that hospital gurney staring up at the white ceiling, all I could think about was one thing. I need to call my parents. I had told myself on that gurney that surely this time would be different, that hearing the words car accident and hospital would finally wake something up in my mother. I was wrong one more time. The doctors told me I had a broken left collarbone and needed 3 stitches above my ear. They wanted to keep me overnight for observation in case of a concussion. Lily was unharmed, but they wanted to monitor her for 24 hours just to be safe. I lay in that hospital bed with my left arm immobilized, staring up at a ceiling so white it felt like staring at nothing. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. The room smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. And after a long moment, I reached for my phone with my good hand and called my mother. My heart was pounding. I told myself she would come. She had to come. When she picked up, I kept my voice as steady as I could. Mom, I was in an accident. I'm at Vanderbilt right now. There was a pause on the other end. Then she said, "What do you mean? Rebecca just called us. She's been crying for an hour and she can't calm down." I felt my chest tighten. Mom, I just need someone to watch Lily for one night. Just one night. My mother cut me off before I could finish. We can't leave Rebecca alone right now. And just like that, the line went silent. I set the phone down on the bedside table and stared at the dark screen. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. I just felt something shift inside me. Not pain exactly, but a deep, settling cold. The kind of cold that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself about something you've known for a long time. A few minutes later, a nurse stepped into the room and asked gently, "Is there anyone coming to pick up the baby tonight?" I shook my head slowly. She gave me a look I will never forget. Not pity exactly, but the kind of quiet sadness that comes from seeing something that should never have happened. It was 9:30 that night when the door to my room opened again. I expected another nurse. Instead, it was my grandfather, Harold. He was still wearing his coat, like he had driven straight there without stopping. His face was flushed, and his jaw was set tight. He looked at me for a moment, then said in a low, controlled voice, "Your mother told me you were fine, that it was nothing serious." I couldn't speak. The tears I had been holding back all day finally came. He crossed the room without another word, sat down in the chair beside my bed, and carefully lifted Lily from the hospital bassinet. He held her close and studied her tiny face for a long moment. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "She looks just like you did when you were small." He looked up at me with steady eyes and said, "I'm here now. You don't have to worry about anything anymore." On his way out that night, Grandfather Harold stopped at the nurse's station and asked about my condition. One of the nurses, not knowing the full story, said quietly, "We're glad someone finally came. She had nobody with her when they brought her in." Harold went still. He stood there without moving for several seconds, and something in his expression changed in a way I would only understand much later, because that was the moment he decided he was going to find out exactly what had been happening to his granddaughter, and what he discovered would change everything. What Grandfather Harold discovered in the days that followed would quietly set in motion something none of us could have predicted. In the week after the accident, Harold took Lily home with him while I recovered. He brought groceries to my apartment without being asked. He sat with me in silence when I didn't have the energy to talk. And while he was helping me, he was also asking questions. Quietly, carefully, the way a man of his generation did when something didn't sit right with him. He reached out to relatives, to neighbors, to people who had known our family for years, and what he found made his blood run cold. My parents had been telling everyone that they were exhausted from constantly supporting their irresponsible older daughter, that I was a burden, that they had been carrying me for years. Not one word of it was true. They had never given me a single dollar. Every cent had gone to Rebecca. One afternoon, while I was resting, Harold opened the small drawer beside my kitchen table looking for a pen. Instead, he found a worn spiral notebook. He opened it and began reading. It was filled with my handwriting. Every expense tracked to the last cent. Grocery lists with items crossed off because I couldn't afford them. Notes about which nights Lily had been up and how many hours of sleep I had managed. He read every page. Then he closed it slowly, folded it, and placed it in the inside pocket of his coat. He never mentioned it to me. He simply went home that evening, called his attorney, and changed his will. He told no one. He only left a sealed letter for me with instructions that said it was to be opened after he was gone. Life moved forward the only way I knew how. One day at a time, $1 at a time. I kept my nursing shifts at night and started baking from home during the day to bring in extra income. There were nights when Lily had finally fallen asleep, and I would stand in my little kitchen with flour on my hands and burning eyes, so tired I could barely think straight. But I kept going. I named the small online shop Lily's Kitchen, started an Instagram account, and made my first sale to a stranger 3 states away. 40 followers became 400, then 4,000. 3 years in, I was shipping orders across the country. 5 years in, I rented a small commercial kitchen. By the time Lily turned 12, I had 3 retail locations operating across Nashville, a team of 8 employees, and a home in a quiet neighborhood with a yard and a porch, and a life I had built from absolutely nothing. Lily grew up bright and warm and full of laughter, completely unaware of the darkness her mother had walked through to give her that life. One evening, she looked up from her homework at the kitchen table and asked me out of nowhere, "Mom, how come we don't really have grandparents like my friends do?" I stopped what I was doing. I looked at her for a long moment, at her dark eyes, her easy smile, the way she asked the question without any malice, just genuine curiosity. I said as gently as I could, "We do, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups just need more time to figure out how to show up." She nodded like that made sense and went back to her homework. I turned back to the counter and stood there for a moment with my eyes burning, saying nothing. My parents had faded into the background of my life over those 12 years. An occasional text on holidays, no warmth behind any of it, no real connection. I had stopped expecting anything from them a long time ago. So on that Friday afternoon when I was sitting at my desk going over inventory numbers, and my phone buzzed with my mother's name on the screen, something in my stomach tightened immediately. I stared at it for 3 full seconds before I answered. Her voice was different, quieter, unsteady in a way I had never heard before. "Laura," she said slowly, "I need to talk to you." She told me my father had been let go after 20 years with the same company. She told me Rebecca was more than $40,000 in debt, some of it from poor decisions, some of it from an online gambling problem that had spiraled out of control. She told me they were close to losing the house. And then, after a long pause, she said the words I had known were coming from the moment I picked up the phone. "We were hoping maybe you could help us." The line went quiet. I closed my eyes. In the darkness behind them, I saw that hospital room. The white ceiling, the humming lights, the phone screen going black after she hung up on me. I heard her voice from 12 years ago, as clearly as if she were standing in the room. "We can't leave Rebecca right now." I opened my eyes. I looked out the window at the Nashville skyline, catching the last of the afternoon light. And I said, in a voice so calm it surprised even me, "Come over for dinner. I'll cook." 2 days later, I watched from my front window as my parents' car pulled slowly into the quiet street where Lily and I had built our life. They stepped out and stood on the sidewalk, taking it all in. The white craftsman house, the flower beds along the walkway, the new car in the garage. My mother's eyes moved across every detail in a way I recognized immediately. She was calculating. Before I could reach the door, Lily had already swung it open, standing there tall and bright-eyed. "Hi, come on in. You must be Mom's family." My mother stopped mid-step, something flickering across her face like she was meeting a stranger she should have known. Rebecca stepped inside and went quiet the moment she saw the living room. The high ceilings, the framed photos of Lily growing up, the shelves lined with business awards, and her expression settled into something that lived uncomfortably between envy and shame. Dinner was polite in the way only deeply uncomfortable things can be. My mother complimented the food. My father asked careful questions. Rebecca said very little until she couldn't hold it anymore. She set down her fork and looked at me with an edge she couldn't quite contain. "How did you afford all of this? Who helped you?" The table went still. I set my spoon down slowly, looked her in the eyes, and said 2 words. "No one did." My father cleared his throat. "Laura, we wanted to talk about our situation." I stood up before he could finish, walked to the kitchen, and returned with a manila folder that I placed in the center of the table. "Grandfather Harold passed away 3 years ago," I said quietly. "Before he died, he changed his will. He left everything to Lily, his savings, his investments, and the property in the Blue Ridge Mountains. All of it." The color drained from my mother's face. Her hands trembled as she reached for the documents. Rebecca's chair scraped back as she stood up. "He had no right to do that. He was our grandfather too." I looked at her calmly. "He left a letter. Would you like me to read it?" No one answered. I opened the envelope anyway and read the single line Harold had written. "Those who abandon their family in their most desperate hour have no claim to benefit from it." The room went completely silent. My mother stared down at the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "So you're not going to help us?" I looked at her for a long moment. Not with anger, not with bitterness, just with a steadiness that had taken me 12 years to earn. "You told me once that I had chosen to have my baby, and that it wasn't your responsibility." I never forgot those words. So today I'll say the same thing back to you. You made the choices that brought you here, and that is not my responsibility. The kitchen timer chimed softly from down the hall. Lily appeared in the doorway, slightly flour-dusted, eyes bright. "Mom, the pastries are ready." I turned to her and smiled. A real smile. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and settled and sure. "Let's go get them, baby." As the two of us walked out of that room together, I didn't look back. Because the greatest thing I ever did was never the business, or the house, or the money. It was the decision, made quietly in a hospital bed 12 years ago, to stop waiting for people to show up, and to become everything I needed instead. Sometimes the most powerful answer you can give to the people who left you behind is not a confrontation. It is a life so full and so complete that they walk into it one day as strangers and finally understand exactly what they chose to lose.